What is that like being a privacy engineer?
Let me approach this as a former auditor, and then I'll
Hmm.
talk about the privacy engineer piece. So, the one thing about GRC, Henri, is I call them recession-proof jobs because um, you're gonna always need auditors. So look, cheat code pro tip. If you will tie your profession to a regulation, a government regulation, you will always be employed because every publicly traded company has to comply with the regulation, right? And so Sarbanes-Oxley, I'll pick on that one for a second, which is a short for SOX, SOX, not SOC. SOX, every publicly traded company has to comply. And so they are going to always need auditors to look at that information. And so, as an auditor, when I would get pushback from people, I don't care who it was, right? Whether it be finance or security, two things always come up. One, because your CFO has to sign off on SOX, right? For every CFO has to sign off and say they have validated our books are not cooked. Do you want your CFO to have to call you and be like, why did we not do this? That's a hell of a motivator for most people, right? And then on the privacy side of things, we call it brand equity. So if, as an example, let's say big corporation conglomerate. Let me pick on Disney as an example. So Disney owns Hulu. If Hulu messes up, if Hulu were to have a data breach, what's going to happen in the press is not Hulu. It's going to be Disney. Disney leaked customer data. That's going to be the tagline in the New York Times. And so I like to tell people that for brand equity is everything for most companies, right? Your name is everything. And always remember that when it comes to your word is everything. So in terms of brand equity, I like to tell people if they're pushing back on something that we've asked them to do is just remember that if this shows up in the New York Times, do you want this to be your name that gets tagged to it, as the product manager, or do you want it to be the company name? Like, think about these things. Those things are real. And so I hope I'm answering your question.
No, you are. You're answering it because it's kind of the philosophy I would use when I would do my jobs. If I came across whether it's the detection that doesn't work, or my team's doing something wrong, or process that doesn't make sense, or something has changed in this alerting that we're missing, it's what I bring up because I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, don't bring it up. I may be the one that's saying, hey, sorry, but hey, we got to either get you out the contract or we got to fire you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same philosophy that I take when I do my job. It's like, hey, no, I'm going to bring up everything I can. What are some of the most common mistakes that organizations make when it comes to privacy, and how can they avoid them? I think this ties into kind of what we just talked about.
Yeah, what are the pitfalls? You actually brought this up earlier. You talked about asset management,
Mm-hmm.
and you can think about that in the same way you think about data. So if you haven't classified your data, if you haven't tagged everywhere where your data is being stored, that can get you in a lot of trouble, right? Because let me use a very broad example and say you've got, let me pick on Warner Brothers. Here we go. So you've got a gaming department who is standing up a platform, and it just so happens that we've got a database over here with our HBO Max. I'm just making this up as an example. All of our HBO Max customers, let's say the gaming department really likes the database setup. And so you've given them access to that. And some engineer, for whatever reason, created a data pipeline or a data lake, right? And connected the two systems. Well, now you've got all this free flowing customer data. And so if they end up doing something that ends up leaking data on one end where this data was actually supposed to be on this end, when they go to clean up, I forget which department actually does this, right? Like incident management, or you might call it privacy investigations. When they go back to do the post-mortem to see like, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? Well, now they're chasing all over the place looking for data because they didn't tag their data where it was supposed to be. That's one small example of that. Might have been a little bit confusing.
It wasn't, and you'd be surprised how well. You're not surprised because you're get in there, but the people's watching will be surprised how this is not anything that's not too uncommon. And I'm talking about the biggest companies you can think of. It's not uncommon that they're running around like chickens with their head cut off because they don't know where things is, or somebody stood something up and you don't know what it is. The simplest things can cause like everything to fall down. And this goes from not only if we're talking, we can talk physical access. Somebody is able to mimic the key cards. They can steal the frequency
Yes.
and get in, or just watch you and figure out how what you stay on it. And my first job doing help desk was for I was a TSA contractor, so everyone couldn't come into first of all our area. And in order to get into the area, you had to badge and put your pin in and go in. Now, at certain companies, I'm there and I'm just like, okay, if this
You
stuff's
write
supposed
your
to be
name on a piece of paper.
no, like it's just a badge. You just badge and you go in. But I'm like, if somebody was to piggyback me and get out of here, what's gonna stop them? If they copy my frequency, cool. But if they didn't know the pin, they can't get in. Even the small things, adding that extra layer, or not having visible security guards, not having cameras where you're supposed to be. All these things like tie into everything.
It's the small things. When I was at Waste Management, so the trucks that pick up your trash and take it to the landfill, they were using RFID. If anyone's familiar with that, it's a form of a radar or something. I forget what it stands for. Basically, it works the same technology where you have a key fob, and those RFID trucks, or the RFID that was on the trucks at the time, no one had questioned what type of data can you pick up from this RFID if you're in the vicinity of it, right?